Leaders from the 20 largest economies in the world met in London on April 2nd to discuss the fate of the world's economy. The summit was met with perhaps tens of thousands of street protesters around the city, as citizens crowded the streets demanding that their economic brain trust come to some conclusion about how to help the people rather than just the banks. Unfortunately, those protesters seem to have been left out of the decision-making once again. As part of their solution, the G20 collectively agreed to put together at least $1 trillion directed at driving economic recovery. They also agreed to adapt more stringent financial regulations, which many believe will be instrumental in rebuilding the crumbling edifice of world finance. The G20 controls roughly 90% of world economic activity, so their agreements are certainly going to have a widespread effect. As British Prime Minister Gordon Brown put it, this was the day the world came together to fight back against a global recession. One of the main talking points of the G20 was the fate of the International Monetary Fund. The IMF was in peril as a result of this crisis, meaning that the smaller economies of the world which it serves were also in peril. Many of the financial institutions in the world's smaller economies have been bought out by Western companies and banks. Those companies and banks are now hemorrhaging cash, losing everyone else's money hand over fist. The G20 responded to this crisis by tripling the lending power of the IMF to nearly $750 billion. They also expanded the IMF's currency reserves by $250 billion. The leaders believe that this will save or create millions of jobs worldwide and create a transition toward a green economy. The leaders also reached a vague consensus to rein in financial excesses, which have been blamed for driving the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression. There is consensus that more regulation is necessary on tax havens, hedge funds, and other non-traditional loophole markets. Leaders vowed to extend regulation and oversight to all systemically important financial institutions. Unfortunately, the G20 did come to one disastrous conclusion. They agreed across the board that protectionism must be avoided at all costs. This would be fine in a perfect world if everyone actually pursued free and open markets. But this world is not perfect. World leaders, particularly from Europe, Japan, and China, will talk about how much they love free trade until they're blue in the face. They then return home and continue their covert protectionist strategies anyway. Meanwhile, the United States, perhaps the only country in the world still fruitlessly pursuing free trade, will continue to listlessly drive toward its own destruction. America's leaders have failed to realize that this nation is already in the midst of a trade war and that it is losing badly. We could have gone to the G20 and put our foot down. We could have called out the protectors of the world and told them that either they stop their practices or we break all the deals and go it alone. China needs our market to dump its cheap goods just as much as the US needs China to make the things we no longer provide for ourselves. They are destroying our economy, and we should have taken this opportunity to show that eventually it will come back to bite them. Who will buy the shoddily made Chinese products when the US collapses? Europe, including Australia, Japan, and Russia, make for themselves. Africa has no money to buy anything anyway, same for South America and for most of Asia. If the United States falls apart, the only people left with money to waste on Chinese goods will be the few in the Middle East who actually profit off of oil. And they don't necessarily have to buy China, they could buy from somewhere else. In essence, we had a chance as a nation to stand up and show the world that we are still leaders. Instead, we just sat back and toed the old party line. Gordon Brown may have alluded to a new world order, but what he should have said was that we were pursuing the same thing we've been doing for the last 30 years. If the G20 wanted to remake the world, it could have. After all, it does control almost all of the money. Instead, they just wanted the status quo, and that's what they got. And that's just not good enough. On behalf of concerned citizens, I'm Craig Harrington. For more on this and other related topics, please log on to economyincrisis.org.
Wake up, America! Open up your eyes! Wake up, America! Wake up!
Produced by economyincrisis.org.